Okay, so we're going to take a look here at the touch capabilities. So there's on the ESP32 it has I think 10 touch capable pins, which are used like a capacitive touch sensor. This is similar to kind of like how on your phone it can detect where you touch the screen. It's not exactly the same thing, but that's also a type of capacitive touch. This one, the way it's working is that it's got there's an internal oscillator, and basically it's connected to an RC circuit, and essentially the way capacitance works, when you touch something, you can affect its capacitance. And so if we have a way to measure that capacitance, and we'll learn about RC circuits and timing and stuff later, but based on the amount of time it takes to charge or discharge something, you can measure the capacitance. And if you're able to affect that capacitance, then you can affect that timing, and that's how it's able to detect somebody touching with these pins. And so this allows us to detect when you touch something, and it's pretty cool. And so like if you wanted to make like a lamp where you like touch the lamp and it turns on, this is a way that you could do that. I've seen someone who had a product where you like touch a lamp. They had like a wooden lamp, you touch it and it turns on. That uses something like this. And so it's pretty straightforward, but we'll look through the kind of the documentation how to do it. And so all we got to do is we're going to perform this touch read on that pin. So it doesn't look like we need to even do any initialization. It looks like we can set the cycles for a measurement operation. Okay, and so it takes about a half of a millisecond for touch read to take place, which is not very much time, but if you're trying to do a bunch of stuff really fast at once, it could be an issue. Depends on these values. So we can kind of adjust this to allow. Okay, this is interesting. So you have a way to kind of like have measurements and cycles, and you have some control here. We probably will just use this interface, but something else that's really cool is we can actually attach like an interrupt. And so maybe you have a device and you want to save power and it goes to sleep, and then you can have an interrupt set to the touch pin, so where you will touch it and then it will wake up the device from that sleep state, which is kind of cool. And then there's other stuff here related to the interrupts and the waking it up. And then this is a little bit different. So they have different API depending on which chip you're using there. So it looks like it's pretty simple. All we do is we perform the touch read to read that pin, and it's going to give us the level that it's reading. So this is where it's a little bit kind of like you have to try it out and adjust the thresholds and stuff based on what you're seeing. And this is an example using the interrupts right here. Okay, but we're just going to do this one here, and I've got the kind of startings of it already done. But before we do that, we're going to come over here, and this is how we want to wire up our ESP32. So we're going to connect the touch pin to pin D4 here, okay, and then we're going to have an LED connected to pin D5, okay, and we've got the resistor going to ground. Oh, it says it's connected to 3.3 volts here, so that's a mistake. This should be connected to ground instead of 3.3 volts. But this is basically otherwise correct how we wire it. Okay, and so from here, wait a minute, is it different on mine? No, yeah, we're good. So we're going to go ahead and run the code on this now. Okay, and so we're here in Platform IO. We've got our Arduino library included. We've got our pin set to touch pin 4, our LED set to pin 5, and we're using our threshold. We're going to use a threshold of 50, and this is something we're going to mess around with to see what's going to make the most sense for us. And so we're going to begin the serial monitor. We're going to set our LED as an output, and then we're going to start by turning the LED off. Okay, and basically what we're going to do is we're just going to use this touch pin to turn our LED on. And so we're going to perform this touch read operation, and we're going to print out our value, and then based on that value, we're going to turn the LED on. So if it's below our threshold, we'll turn it on. Otherwise, we're going to turn it off. Okay, so we'll run this code, and we'll go ahead and see what it looks like. I'm going to open this up in Arduino to use the Arduino plotter. There is a tool that I've been using in Platform IO here, but for simplicity's sake, we'll use the Arduino version. All right, so I've got the code on there now, and we're going to pull up, as I mentioned, the Arduino serial plotter. So we're going to go Tools, Serial Plotter. If you have the V2, we got to set the COM port. Let's see, we're on COM 6. If you have the version 2, it's a little bit different to get that serial plotter open. But here we go. We've got our plotter. And so you can see when I press this, it's going to change. Here, let me stop it and clear this out. Okay, so I just closed that and reopened the serial plotter. So I've got that wire connected there, and if I touch it, you can see it. So this is me just touching the wire itself, not actually touching the contact. And you can see that that causes the capacitance to change, and this value is dropping. Now, if I actually touch the metal contact, you can see it drops down even further. And depending on like how hard I squeeze it, you can see, and this would just depend on like how good the contact is between my fingers. You can see it drops all the way down. So now, right now, it's at, looks like it's bottoming out around 20, or this is even maybe around 10. And so, but you can see that when I get to really, if I'm not touching it, so here I'm moving around it and just kind of brushing the wire itself. Here I'm holding the wire, and then here it goes all the way down. And so I have the threshold set at 50, and so anytime it's dropping below 50, it's turning on the LED here. And so if I disconnect the wire, you'll see the value jumps way up to like 78 or something. And it's even different like when you have all the pins in there. And so that's why it's helpful to look at it on this chart. But if I plug this back in, so like I'm not even like touching the wire right now, just having the wire plugged in, that capacitance changes again. And so it's a little bit kind of dependent on how you have it set up, and that's why, again, you got to be able to set these thresholds. So coming back to here, we have that threshold set at 50, and so you can see 50 is going to be like right around here. So anytime it drops below here, it's going to turn that light on. So you can see it's dropping. The light's not on yet. I'm touching it, but the light's not on. I have to squeeze a little bit to get it below that point. And then here it's kind of like flickering on and off because it's going back and forth. And then if I get like good contact, I can do that. The other thing you can do is like, I've got a piece of foil here that I'm sticking onto it. I'm just going to squeeze this foil onto that piece of wire. Right now I'm touching the foil, but so I got that foil squeeze on there now. And so now if I touch, you can see it's a little bit lower than it was before with the foil on there. And then I don't have to touch it like as hard necessarily to get it to respond. And so that foil can help a little bit. It's a little, it's not super consistent, you know, and so you got to kind of tune it to do what you want. And so this controls though a single LED. And then if we want to have like a whole bunch of LEDs, use a bunch of touch pins, that's what we're going to take a look at next here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is this. We're going to change this. Instead of just being controlled by a single one, we're going to control by a whole bunch of them. Okay, and so we're going to use this circuit design. Again, I have this in the wrong spot. It should be right here connected to ground instead of 3.3 volts. But we're going to connect a capacitive touch sensor to pin 4, pin 15, pin 13, pin 12, and pin 14. So we're going to use those 5 touch sensors. We're going to have an LED on pins 5, 18, 19, 21, and 22. So we got those 5 LEDs there. And now we're going to control all of them at the same time using our 5 jumper wires connected to our touch sensors. Okay? And so coming down to here, let's go ahead and do that. And so we're going to basically make a function that's going to control an LED. So we're going to say void control LED. And for each LED, we're going to have a different threshold. We're going to have a different pin that we want to turn on, and we're going to have a different pin that we're reading. And so we're going to have we'll have our touch pin. We'll have our LED pin, and then we're going to have our threshold. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and put this prototype up at the top so that we don't have any compiler errors in platform IO. Give it a semicolon. Okay, and so now we're going to basically put this function right here, where instead of having this logic here, we're going to have it down in that function. So we're going to take this, okay, and we'll actually perform the read here as well. So I'm going to take all of this here. Okay. And so currently our touch pin is just touch pin, and our LED pin is LED, and then our threshold is threshold. Okay, and then this will be LED pin and LED pin. And so now in our loop, we're going to pass those three things into the control LED function. The reason we're doing this is now we can make a for loop, and we can create ourselves an array full of variables we can iterate through. Okay, and so instead of having a touch pin variable, we're going to have a touch pins variable. That will be an array of the pins we want to use. And so I have a list here. So 4, 15, 13, 12, and 14. Okay, so now I got our touch pins, and we're going to have the corresponding LEDs and threshold. So U int 8T, we'll go thresholds, and I'll just set them all at 50 for now, and we can change it later as we need to. And yours will probably be different than mine. So we want to make sure that all these arrays are the same length, though, so we don't end up trying to get a mismatch or something. And ideally, we can make like a struct that would have the touch pin, the LED pin, and the threshold. But for now, we're just going to go a little simpler here. All right, our LEDs are 5, 18, 19, 21, 22. Okay, so now we've got these three arrays, and then we need a variable to track the number of pins that we're using. And so we're going to say uint 8t num pins. And what we're going to do is here in our setup, I'm going to say num pins equals size of the touch pins array divided by the size of the first entry in the touch pins array. And what this does is we have memory set aside for that array, and then we have memory set aside for, or we know the size basically of one entry in that array. And so if we divide the whole size by the size of 1, that tells us how many things are in there. And the purpose of that is that allows us to add more items into our arrays here, and it'll just calculate how many we have. And so from here now, we need to initialize all these. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say for int I equals 0, the num pins. We're going to loop through, and now we're going to set each of those LEDs as an output. So we'll say LEDs, and we'll index it with I, just like that. Okay, and we set it to low, so we'll turn it off. And now here we're going to come to our loop where we control it. And so we're going to say, do the same thing. We'll have our for loop. Okay, and then instead of this, going to put our control LED function, and this will be touch pins I. So we're getting these values from our array, and threshold I, just like that. Okay, so we're going to loop through that array. We're going to read the touch pin, we're going to compare it to the threshold, and then we're going to turn the LED on and off. Now, one thing we're going to do is we want to still print these values on the serial monitor or the serial plotter. And so the way we need to do that is we need to delete this. So it prints on the same line. And the serial plotter likes us to do like comma separated. So we're going to do serial print. I'm going to put a comma there to indicate it's a new value. Okay. And then when we're done looping through, we'll put a new line so it knows to put this will basically tell it that that's a single set of data when we enter the new line like that. And so we're going to loop through, record the value of each one, get the new line so we can run the next one. And so now this will control our 6 LEDs with the touch pins. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to actually build off this later. I think I'd like to try to make a little piano. And so we're going to try to do that next here. But first we're going to get kind of this basic functionality there. So we got all that, got all that, we got all that. And so now we'll go ahead and run this. And you'll see that when I try to run it here, it's going to fail. Let's see, I've got some extra stuff up here. Okay, so I cleaned it up a little bit. We're going to run this. Before we do, because we have this open, it's going to fail. And so we're going to close out of this, because that way we free up the serial monitor so we can program it, or the serial port rather. Now we're going to run this. So it's running it, it's connecting, it's programming it, and then when it's done programming, now we can go ahead and go back to Arduino and open up the serial plotter. And we're going to open up again to clear out that first little set of things. And now we see our 6 capacitive kind of touch pins. And so if I touch, this is pin 4, and then we got pin, let's see, pin 15 right here. I'm touching here. And then we've got pin, I think it's 12, 13, and 14. So here's 13. Touching pin 13. So you can adjust the thresholds manually depending on the pin. That's 13. And 12. And then 14. Okay? And so now we can control our 5 LEDs with these 5 different touch pins, and they'll each kind of turn on based on those arrays that we created. And so now if you notice, like, for example, see, these actually thresholds were all pretty close. So it looks like 50 would work for all of them. But if you decided, you know what, it's not responsive as I'd like it to be, or if it's too responsive and we're getting some false readings, what we can do now is go ahead and check and assign each of these thresholds maps to a single one of those. Okay? And so this is pretty good. I guess it might be worthwhile changing this to be a struct, so we could go something like this. So we can say type def struct touch pin LED type, and then we'll just put these 3 values. So uint 8t touch pin, then uint 8t threshold, and uint 8t LED. And so now we have a struct that will allow us to contain all these in one place. And so then we would say, make our struct like this. So we'll go and comment these out. Touch pin array, we'll call it, so it doesn't have any conflicts. And then we're going to say equals. And now we're going to say, so the first one was 4, 55. And the next one was 15, 50, 18. And we just keep doing this, right? We'll make a couple more of these. So we've got 13, 50, 19, 12, oops, 12, 51, and then finally 14, 50, 22. Okay, and so now we've got our touch pin array, and so we'll modify this now. Touch pin array, 0. So here it's going to be touch pin array dot LED. And then what we'll do here is we're going to modify that control LED function, or we can make a separate version of it. How about that? So we'll make a separate version of this that just takes the what's our type called? Touch pin LED type pointer touch pin LED. Okay, and then here we're going to use this guy, and we'll reference the components. We want to read the touch pin. We want to compare it to the threshold. And then here we want to control the pin, or control the LED. And there we have it. And so this is an override, so we have the two versions of the function. And we'll take this one and put it up here with the other one. And then down here, oh, it doesn't like that. Pin mode. Let me look at that there. So here though, I'm just passing control LED, touch pin array. I'll enter I, and then we have to pass it as, we have to pass the reference. And we're good there. Okay, I think here, touch pin array I, that's what we do. And then we access the LED. That was the problem. Okay, so now we've modified this to use our struct here that we created. We can easily add more pins here. So we have the touch pin, the threshold, and the LED pin. And then we initialize our struct, and then we pass it to, we kind of figure out the size of our struct, we initialize those LEDs as off, and then we pass it to that function here to make sure it works. I'm going to test it real quick and make sure there's no errors here. And so I went to test it and I failed to upload, so just remember to close out this before you perform that upload so it can access the COM port. And now we'll give it a shot. Tools, serial plotter. Okay, so we got our 5 touch pins again. We can touch them. Interestingly, you can see that we're getting these two channels here. So this is 12, 13, and 14 right in here. You can see that they're affected just by their proximity. I think when I do pin 4 as well, I might get some effects. So yeah, pin 4, getting some effects on 15 here, but really I'm seeing it on all of them. That's interesting. You get all this noise from these other pins, these other capacitive touch pins. And so this is good for detecting like touches, but it's pretty, you can see there's a lot of kind of noise in this data coming from the other pins. And so you wouldn't necessarily want to use this for something that you need like a really high precision for. I think it's just good for detecting that touch, and then you have the ability to set that threshold. Okay, so now we've got the ability to, we made some, we built a struct for holding our touch pin, our threshold, and our LED. We initialized an array of those structs. We come in and we initialize the LEDs as off. And then we come here and we loop through those LEDs, and for each one we're going to read the pin. We're going to output the value to the serial monitor, and then we're going to check to see if the value that we read is less than the threshold, and if it is, we're going to turn that LED on, and if it's not, we're going to turn it off. Okay, and so we're in a pretty good state here, and then we have this other version that we made first where we don't need to use that struct. And so the next step now is we're going to come back and we're going to take some time to look at the DAC, the digital analog converter, and then after that we'll turn this into a little keyboard or piano or something and have some fun with it.